Hey Nick, good to see you again.
Hi, Cathal. Hi. How are you?
I'm great, and thanks for joining us. It was good to see you again last week. I think we had a great session there with a client.
Yes, yeah. They keep bumping into each other in different parts of the world. It's
Yeah,
always
yeah. It's what there's the one call where we can say good morning and good afternoon, and we're still correct. That is anyway. Look, we've had a series of conversations over the past couple of weeks, and it's all been centered on this topic where there's been significant investment in the last 18 months in AI. And now people are looking at that investment and saying, well, how do I take this to scale? And they've hit this bump on the road where many companies have realized they've adopted a strategy that is quite fragmented. Not all companies, some are really been super successful and it's showing up in the bottom line and the top line. And I know that you've had the gift of looking inside many companies across the globe. We've had the same opportunity. And that's really what brought us together to produce this white paper called Going Beyond AI Islands. Um, Give me your thoughts on this.
yeah. Okay. Well, if it's all right with you, I'm going to go back to get in that context of going back 18 months or even more than that actually. Let's say 2 years now, when kind of generative AI burst onto the scene with that launch of GPT-3 and ChatGPT suddenly became a thing everybody knew about. And I've been thinking back on this a lot recently because I think what was kind of exciting about that is the big context. We were coming off the back of, you know, the metaverse and NFTs and some things, a lot of things which, let's be honest, had been kind of, presented to the world as being, the next big thing, the big investment, those sorts of things. And, maybe some of those things will be in future, but, they were too early. Whereas when generative AI came on the scene, like it not only did it worked way better than anyone had experienced before, and everybody could have it. Like there's a free version that you can use straight away. You can't discount that. I mean, that's amazing. Those things don't come along that often. But I do think what that did is it kind of got everybody into a bit of a false sense of security. It's like, here's this thing, it's pre-trained, it looks amazing in demos. Let's go off and, let's just build, let's start building because we can. It's very easy to get to start building. And I think even at the time, I remember talking to some of our, real tech specialists in our at BCGX, which is our tech design and build part of BCG, and they were saying, "Is look, the difficulty here is not going to be building the stuff. The difficulty is going to be controlling it. Like we've got these are bots that want to answer lots of questions. They want to talk. That's what they've been trained to do. So the real challenge is getting that control. And I think obviously that's part of what we're seeing now as organizations have become more mature. They've they've learned that actually building the sort of the structure around the bots and the AI is the most important bit really, and then the AI can kind of in some ways even sort of build itself beyond there. But I guess like I'm interested in your point of view as well. I mean, I guess like I don't think it's correct to say that the last 2 years have been a wasted effort. Like anything but. Like it seems to me like a lot of people have learned a lot during that time that's going to be really valuable for the future. Is that kind of how you would look at that?
I think it's absolutely like the experimentation phase is critical. In fact, there's one company that we've spoken to. There's many companies we've spoken to, but one company really stands out. And they actually said if we didn't go through the experimentation phase, we don't think we could have culturally aligned the organization for the readiness to scale. So for many, it was a necessary condition because the culture of testing and experimentation just didn't exist. And ChatGPT, etc., has really opened up the need to experiment. So there is that phase that companies had to go through, but it's one you had to go through, and one now you also need to think about how do you complete and how do you take that into scale. And I think that's really where people look at their investments and they say, hey, where's the value? And I'm curious to get your thoughts, Nick. Is the question that's centered around value the right question? Or is it a question that should be more focused on strategy and execution? Because what we've seen from the experiments is some companies have really created great execution. but in a very narrow field, in a very narrow discipline, with a very narrow impact. And they've seen some value inside of that. It's how do you take that right across the enterprise, right across the domain, right across your vertical?
Yeah, I think that's the question for now, isn't it? Yeah, because yeah, so prior research that BCG's done, and it definitely comes up in this Beyond AI Islands report that we've done together, suggests that those that have been most successful so far are ones that have focused on a small number of use cases, so typically two or three. And the key areas we see that, of course, software engineering, customer support, customer care, and some in marketing as well. Picked two or three key use cases and really doubled down on those things and focused in on not just the build of the technology, the build of the infrastructure to enable that technology to happen. So, the data pipelines, the data assurance, all of that sort of stuff, the cloud platforms to do it, but also the process and people and operations changes that need to be done to make it work. You have to change a process, fit it in properly, fit it into customer journeys. And of course, those that have done it have learned, wow, that's kind of most of the effort, certainly more than half the effort. Sometimes 70% of the effort is doing all that stuff. So the question becomes, well, okay, so you've done that for two or three, but what about this vision of a future where we have tens of thousands, maybe even hundreds of thousands of bots in an organization? Well, we're not going to do that every time. So being able to kind of package this and make it more, repeatable and scalable, that's the big question. Yeah.
Yeah. So, Core grew up on the East Coast. So, governance, compliance, they were all central to kind of how the company grew up. But you and I had a chance to sit together a week ago, and you had a very profound statement around governance and design. And I think it's really important people hear that from you, because we are seeing governance shift really, really early on into the conversation. It's no longer an afterthought. And I think you'll agree, it cannot be an afterthought.
Yeah. Well, I mean, first, thank you for describing it as profound. I think what I said was governance is just not sexy. Like, it's not the most exciting thing in the world. It's how do you, compared to these amazing demos of self-generated videos that we see all the time, governance, it's hard to kind of cut through with the same sort of levels of excitement. But absolutely, and we see this a lot in terms of the maturing of technology, is ultimately when you want to scale, governance, if done in the right way, it doesn't constrain you. It actually enables you to do more. I did a workshop a few weeks ago with some people that work in the public sector. And actually, we did a survey beforehand. And one of the most surprising things was, maybe not surprising, depending on your point of view, I don't know, but what was surprising to me was like 9 out of 10 of the people there said that there was no AI governance in their organization. There was no AI policy, even, let alone a sort of governance to manage that policy. And what we found was that actually had a chilling effect on their ability to innovate with AI, because nobody knows what they're allowed to do. So they assume they're not, especially in public sector, they assume they're not allowed to do anything. Whereas when we've worked with organizations to then build that governance framework, starting with a strategy, what do we want to do with the AI, starting getting to a policy, how do we want people to use AI and work together and work responsibly? When you have those guardrails in, that unlocks the innovation and the creativity, because then people know how they can act within themselves, within the organization in a responsible way. And actually, we've kind of done. I mean, I don't always talk about BCG having brilliant internal processes, because we don't always. But one of the things I think we have done very well is we've set those guardrails for using AI responsibly. And a lot of my colleagues, I experiment a lot. A lot of my colleagues do some amazing experiments with using agentic AI to kind of get their tasks done. I think that's a great model for how we can use governance to enable people to innovate.
I think you actually went beyond saying it was sexy. I think you may have said governance is a design priority. And it almost stood out to me like George W. Bush's no new taxes statement. Because I think you've touched on something critical here. Governance is not a constraint. It is an enabler. It is the compass that every company needs as they embrace AI. And I think everybody inside a business is actually looking for that direction. They seek it from you at BCG. They seek it from us at Core, based on our experience of deploying. But so let's just talk about experimentation a little bit more, if that's okay. Pilots, pilots, pilots. Every company has embraced them. The conversation is very much shifting now, and it's shifting to return on investment. There have been billions of dollars, billions of labor hours invested into this. And now companies are looking not just for cost takeout to impact the bottom line, but they're also looking at ways to impact the top line. What are you seeing there at BCG in terms of how companies are really taking the shift? Because there have been many companies who are very, very successful at taking this leap. In fact, I think over a quarter of companies are now seeing the benefit and are beginning to differentiate from their peers in their sector.
Yeah, I mean, in fact, let me start with that because I had a great recent experience that really shows the value of start being bold, starting early, and having a really bold ambition. So we worked with a tech company in February 2023, so 2-3 months after the launch of ChatGPT, and their CEO said, "We want to reduce the number of trouble tickets that we're handling by 80%." Like massive, massive reduction in the amount of support tickets that they're having to handle in their organization. And people that worked in that part of the organization kind of looked at them and said, "Are you mad? Like that's not possible." But what that did is it triggered the right kind of thinking to say, how do we really not just think about automating some little bits of a process or looking at the obvious stuff, but actually what would it mean to have an organization where actually customers really don't need to contact us to get help most of the time? And what's been great is then to work and come back to that organization over the last 2 years and to find, well, actually, let's be honest, they haven't reduced support tickets by 80%, but they're well on their way. They've had a significant reduction. But one of the things they have done is they've reduced turnaround time by over 80%. And that wouldn't have happened if they hadn't got themselves into this idea of, let's have a really stretching ambition. What do we actually need in terms of our teams, in terms of our capabilities to make that happen? And how should we work together, as you say, to kind of test and rapidly iterate to get to those things and really stretch ourselves? And so it's a great result. And I always think, because there's always a bit of a difference between a big, bold ambition that you're setting and what you're actually putting in the budget that's going to everyone's going to feel worried about and hold themselves to account for. And so, that's sometimes to me is the sort of secret of a good transformation, is really starting with that great kind of ambitious start.
Well, I think it's interesting, right? So we had a dinner here on the west coast of the USA 1 or 2 weeks back, and I asked for a show of hands. And the question was the following: how many of you have a metric to measure against to determine success? 30 people in a room, so not a population of 1 million. Under 1/3 of the room put up their hands. And we know even inside of that 33%, there may have been one or two who were motivated to follow the group. So I think setting a clear goal is very critical. But equally, Nick, I think you might find from your experience that the goal setting can come from top down, but equally bottom up. We had one client, I think you had the exposure to the client as well, who said, we have a cost takeout goal of 10%, and the only way we want you to achieve it is through AI. We had a second client that we're talking with, and they felt to achieve their goals, it had to be grassroots. It had to bring that creative community with the technology, to both of them to embrace it together. So I guess there's no one formula, but having that outlook, even if you don't achieve it, can create a ripple effect elsewhere inside of the company. Is that what you tend to see?
Yeah, I think so, but really coming back to the whole, and thank you for reminding me, by the way, the governance is a design priority. I'm glad I had the I should use it more. So governance being a design priority, like this is a classic example of that, because I think you only get that ripple effect if you have the right platform. And by platform, I mean ways of working, operating model, as well as the tech platform. That's the only way that you can make use of that ripple effect. So, for example, reusing components, reusing learnings that have gone before, actually measuring the success. And as you say, that's multifaceted. It's relatively easy usually to measure like a KPI improvement. So I don't know, how long it took somebody to write a piece of code, or the answer time for a customer email. But actually converting that into like a meaningful customer experience metric or a productivity metric, that's the bit that you really need to have a good hand on the data for. So I think all of this starts to point to the need for those platforms and those governance.
Yeah, and I think if it's okay to share, you and I met a joint client last week in the financial services space, and they entered that room looking for a solution for, let's call it a department, and left the room saying, for this really to impact, we've got to go enterprise wide. And I think the thing that really brought that together was this orchestration layer. How can I orchestrate across the workflow, not just inside of my own department, but the entire ecosystem of the enterprise that I'm hyper dependent upon? And I think, Nick, the second thing that came out of that conversation was they can reinvent the process, not just take the process as was and automate it, but bring things closer together. And it's not the first time in the recent weeks that I've heard that turnaround time as a metric is fundamentally surfacing to, really surfacing quite high in terms of priority, because it's another way of saying time to market.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, yeah. Because speed has an exponential impact on business performance because you can iterate quicker. So you're not just faster, but you're getting better more quickly as well. And yeah, I think that's a great reflection on that. Actually, I wanted to just pick up on this. So they came away seeing as it was an enterprise thing, and that was definitely the case, wasn't it? I guess the challenge for us, and the challenge for you, organization like Core, though, is the other question is where to start. Like, because yes, we want to be enterprise, but we also don't want to spend X number of years implementing a big platform before we can actually get going with things. Like, what are your thoughts on that?
The first place that everybody goes to, which may not be the right place, and of course I'd say something of that, the debate narrows down into should I build or buy, right? And that's perhaps a critical question. If you choose to build, it has many implications for my talent acquisition strategy, what's core to my business, what's the IP I want to. There's very, very good logic to it, but it may be the wrong first conversation, right? The first conversation really needs to sit with, what is our strategy? What are the use cases? Like, we sit at the application layer. We're not really at, way down here on the stack. We're at the top of the stack. And the first question has got to be the use case. How can I implement it? How quickly can I implement it? Will this allow me to differentiate versus my competition? Will this make us more efficient? And then I think the conversation needs to move to, who is going to do it? And is that a build? Is it a buy? Is it a buy to build? And I think that entire conversation is shifting tremendously. And it may not be the traditional binary of one versus the other. I think there's a place for these to coexist. And I'll bring back this orchestration layer again. As you think enterprise, how do we bring the enterprise with these thousands of potential agents operating across verticals, across organizational structures? So I think that's where we're encouraging people to have the conversation, and then be very comfortable having this build and or buy.
Yeah, right. Because and I know everyone asks that question, build or buy. It's a very common thing we cover, but in some ways, it's not a particularly helpful framing because it's always build and buy. I mean, there's a bunch of fundamental capabilities that you need to buy here. There's no point in building them for yourself, and there's a bunch of increasingly sort of commodifying use cases which you might as well buy as well. But if you want to go for that true value, those, get to this world where you have 10,000 AI agents, you need to build those. Now the question is, do you build it at a sort of machine coding layer, or do you build it at the low code no code layer? And but that's still building, right? Because the IP is really designing how to apply all this AI into those use cases. I wondered whether, I don't know, like as just a sort of thought exercise, maybe we should lay out what we mean when we talk about an orchestration layer. Because I think when we had that meeting last week, I think that was when the sort of penny dropped. It was like, that's what all this stuff does. Do you want to go first? If not, I'm happy to give it a shot. But
I feel like this is where we need that slide maybe brought in.
yeah, okay, all right, yes.
No, but I think it really triggered the conversation to that place where you want to have people, which is that aha moment. And essentially, there was the world of humans maybe setting the strategy and humans working in concert with their AI agent, automating some of the processes, but they are operating in concert. And whatever the workflow may be, if this is marketing from content creation to delivery, how do you ensure that all of these agents are working in concert together? And the more fragmented they are, the more point solutions you have, the greater the difficulty that you might encounter with orchestrating this digital workforce. And I think we very often should think about the digital workforce the way we think about our traditional labor force. Who are they? Who do they talk to? What are the permissions they have? What is their role inside of my organization? And just like you bring your labor force together to an organizational structure, the orchestration of your digital workforce in concert with your humans, I think, is better served for traceability reasons, for guardrails reasons, for compliance and governance reasons, to have that inside of one platform. But I'll let you take a run at it too.
Yeah, I mean, I think you did a great job there. I wanted, maybe I'll illustrate it with a example. It's a thing that we've been learning as we've been going along, but I think the learning is very useful. So we've been working with a business process outsourcer, so a company that runs outsourced call centers for other companies. And one of the things we've been helping them to do is to implement automation and AI within their quality assurance teams. Their quality assurance teams, historically, what they would do is a purely people-focused organization. People would listen into call recordings and sometimes monitor what's going on screen as well, on a video recording of the screen. And they'll score the agents based on their quality and the compliance, how much they adhere to various processes. Extremely manual exercise. Each one takes longer than the length of each call. So if you think, a call's taking 10, 20 minutes, each one of these assessments is taking 30 minutes. So they only get to do maybe maximum 1% to 2% of all the calls or chats got monitored through this process. So it's not a great control process. Like you're not really controlling everything and have oversight of that. So we went in with the idea around, well, we can use AI to automate this, not just to make it more efficient, but actually to massively improve the effectiveness of it. But where we developed was interesting. So it started thinking about this as one bot, the bot that just does the role that a human being is doing today. It listens to a call, has a bit of data as well about the customer, and it automatically creates a scorecard. Now that's one thing, but actually what we really learned was that in and of itself is also not the best way to drive quality improvement. So we actually ended up building 2 extra bots. The second bot, or the second agent, is applying metadata to those call recordings to identify any discrepancies. So I'll give you one example. If a customer on the call makes a complaint, and this is for a regulated industry, so the customer makes a complaint, that complaint needs to be logged formally. So what we do is we listen for the complaint, and then so what the generative AI does is it turns that unstructured data of the call recording into structured data, which is yes, no, flag, was there a complaint made? We can then wash that data against the actual complaints that were raised in the CRM system throughout that week and look at the discrepancies. And immediately you can start to spot patterns of, here's a group of human customer service reps who are not raising complaints when they should do. That's a much more effective way of handling that than doing the call listening, because you're picking up effectively 100% of the cases. And then the third version of this is a bot which is looking for longer term trends. So do we think that there is a gap in the training of some of our human customer service reps, which means they are consistently making mistakes or getting things wrong? Or do we think it's not so much them, it's a problem with the product itself? So some problem upstream is causing lots of customers to contact. And so the role of the human quality assurance analyst now is not someone that spends their whole time listening to calls, but what they're doing is working alongside these three types of bots to not just monitor quality, but to assure quality and improve it and improve overall customer experience. It's really, really improved the scope of what they're able to offer. But of course, the need for orchestration means they don't just come in every morning and listen to calls like they used to. They've got a whole range of tasks, a whole range of interactions with the rest of the organization that they never had before. So it really, that's one thing you manage with three bots. But again, as this expands across the whole customer service organization, going to get a whole lot more complex. Yeah.
And if we can just think about that, and I'm going to steal a little bit here from BCGX. If you think about the moments of joy in your work, it doesn't sit with the mundane copy pasting, stitching data together. The joy shows up when you can see the impact of your work. And a lot of the conversation talks about, taking people out and humans out. But the example you gave actually is letting a human being working with a bot actually achieve their true potential and having more impact more frequently on the company experience, but more importantly, I think in your case, the citizen experience or the customer experience. And we sometimes don't talk about the joy by eliminating the mundane that an agentic agent could actually bring.
Yeah, we talk about we talk a lot. Actually, it's come from so Debbie Lovich, who heads up our people and organization practice, and her team came up with this idea around toil and joy at work. So toil is the work that you do that is unsatisfying, mundane, it grinds you down. And the joy are the things that you do where, you actually finish something, you achieve something, you feel a sense of purpose and accomplishment. And so looking at that through that framework is important, because I think then it becomes a self-driving impact if we can focus on automating the toil, but increasing the joy, which comes from that sense of achievement. But I would say, that doesn't happen automatically. You can accidentally automate the joy away. Going back to the customer service example, I work with I do a lot of work in customer service. So been to a lot of contact centers. I know you've been to a lot of contact centers as well, Cathal. Some people, they love their job. They love talking to customers. They love really engaging with them, listening to them, getting a great answer. Imagine telling that person, right, now you've got to read the script that's in front of you, because the AI knows better than your 30 years of experience how to engage with this customer. Or it says things like, oh, you're confusing this customer, you're talking too fast, those sorts of things. So we do have to be quite careful about that, I think. And that's part of that testing process needs to be, how are people using this? And is it increasing their ability to have an impact, or is it actually constraining them? Yeah.
And I think it goes back to, again, what does value mean to that enterprise? Is it empathy? Is it customer experience? Or is it efficiency? And really picking the right one, I think matters, and it matters to the end outcome. So you've spoken a lot about customer experience. We've seen call centers adopt this, perhaps the first group, easily measurable. What else have you seen across the enterprise? What are the other groups that you're seeing adopt AI, having an impact, and where you feel if they had to wind back the clock, they would have preferred to make a platform decision back then rather than having to go back and perhaps rethink their solution?
Yeah, well, I think marketing is another good example, actually. I mean, that was part of the workshop we were in together last week. But that's a great example where, again, there's a lot of different use cases which might relate to workflow automation, or creating content, or monitoring content, customizing things to different customers, different archetypes of customers. Where there's a lot of vendors in that space offering these sort of point solutions, and everybody's gone out there, bought and built, and those sorts of things. But again, the real value comes from maybe this whole point around turnaround time is important there. Like a piece of marketing work, like marketing copies and a direct reach out to a customer. If we want to really test and learn and get better, we need to be able to do those things quickly. So we talked last week about you're creating marketing copy, but then you've got to wait 3-4 days for compliance to sign off. So, in fact, you gave this example, so I'm borrowing from you now. But you can have the bot that's building the copy, and you can have the compliance bot that's monitoring the copy. And the bot that's building the copy can be created and controlled by the marketing team, and the compliance team can control the compliant bot and set the rules from it. So it's entirely, they're in control of it. They're not losing any control. But ultimately, you've got a bot that's checking the other bot at the same time. Now, there might still be some human eyes on the end of that, but we're talking about a 30-second turnaround time, not 3-4 days. So that's one area. I think obviously software development, software engineering. A colleague of mine, Matt Kropp's, done a huge amount of work on that, and particularly around how we again, similarly inspire software engineers to really take this on board and really improve their productivity, but also create great products that they feel really proud to create. And then the other area is cross enterprise. So a lot of companies will have rolled out, knowledge tools, Copilot, etc. Quite often the approach is you roll it out and see what happens. We're seeing increasingly the benefit of doing that, but providing better guidance and having really the right kind of change management in place. So centers of excellence, champions, actually giving people a reason to do it. So setting targets that make people use it, those sorts of things.
Yeah, I think so. I've heard a few things from you, Nick, today. Unified ecosystem is perhaps the best path to take to unlock enterprise value. Design is a priority. We've heard that from you. You say it a lot better than I do. Build or buy, it may be both, and both should exist and coexist in concert together. The area that we didn't touch on, Nick, is data readiness. Very briefly, what does data readiness actually mean to you in the context of AI?
Well, I think data, I don't know if there is ever such a thing as being ready with data. Right? I think it's, what is required in order to get started. Of course, there are minimum standards around, data assurance and data security, which is kind of a slightly separate topic there. But that's a kind of architecture, solution design type question. But I think, going back to that platform question is what AI demands of us is we need to think differently about what we think of as being data. Like, it's not just the databases that sit within the CRM or within the ERP, those sorts of things. It's everything in an organization, like all of your knowledge content, all of your customer interactions, all of the code, the underlying code, like all of that is data. So having the ability to access that and make use of that vastly expands the range of use cases that you can apply within a platform. It's all going in. But I think this is a good example of, you don't have to do all of it from day one. You can do some of it from day one. Some of it you can even make pretty big compromises on. Data that you might think needs to be real time, maybe it can be an overnight feed or even a weekly feed, and it's still going to give you answers that are good enough within the margin of error of what you need. So really knowing that, how you're going to use the data, where is the value coming from this data, can really help to then prioritize what do you need to make available first and assure first. Yeah.
So you think those couple of thousand sticky notes that are written will actually finally be of value?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, yes, that's some of the most valuable parts of most businesses, I think, is what's written on people's desks, or, what's in their special email folder of things they don't forget.
The unstructured data sources have so much knowledge, and they're so concentrated, and the ability to distribute those, I think, would be great. One last question for you, Nick. It's 2030. Where are we with AI?
The same question back again. think you might give us, a slightly different question. So I think that what we are seeing with AI is it will fundamentally change how organizations work and are structured. It's kind of the same sort of it's the same sort of changes we saw with the internet, let's say for businesses, or with smartphones and social media in the consumer world. Um, but I think even if you look at those changes, like they didn't happen overnight. How long did it take for e-commerce to? E-commerce is still growing now. It's not like it happened overnight, and it's not because the technology isn't a fundamental change. It's just that there is so much inertia in organizations. There's so much natural resistance, and understandable in many ways, resistance to change. That I think what we will see in 2030 is effectively a continuation of what we have seen with digital. So more automation, more roles in organizations which are about managing that automation, governing it, improving it. Some of the examples we've given today. But I'm not actually one of the sort of I'm not of the view that it's going to be so disruptive that everyone's going to be out of a job in a few years' time, or those sorts of things. I think we're all going to have to keep changing in order to keep up. But I think the shocks are not going to be such that it's that disruptive. There's other external things for us to worry about.
Yeah, there's quite a few there. All right.
What's your view on 2030?
I think we're on the right path. I think we're on this journey. I think slowly, quietly, AI, your agentic agent, will become more embedded inside your company. And eventually it's just going to be like electricity or the internet. It's going to feel like a utility, and it's going to be a critical part of your productivity. And I hope one day we won't be talking about AI as this new thing. It will just be embedded inside the company and become how we work.
Yeah. I like I think electricity is a better analogy even than the internet, because like when electricity was invented, it wasn't like everyone was electrified overnight. People were still in London. They still have gas lamps in some parts
Yes.
of town. They still have diesel trains. Like it's not that that's happened everywhere. But of course, but the point is, yeah, nobody goes, oh, how many volts have you got coming into your house? Like it's just a thing that you have, and I think that's a better. It's like that, or like a spreadsheet. Like I think it's something that becomes so immersed in our lives that we don't think about it. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's probably.
that's great. Well, look, Nick, thanks for joining us today. I know we're going to go on a city tour, and there's a QR code here that people can click on and see what cities will be together. We're going to be in Mountain View June 10th. I know hopefully we'll see you in London mid-June.
I'm planning to be at the one in London. Yes, yeah. Changes anyone's mind either way.
Yeah, that's it. It's well, the last time we got together, I think the questions we got from people educated us more than
Mm,
we educated everybody else. So
yeah.
just the opportunity to do that again, I think would be great. So hopefully if people found this a benefit and value, we'll be able to share more insights together over the next few months.
Thanks, Carl.
Yeah. Thanks, Nick.